Ladies and gentlemen, we're back once again here on Angel's Combat World. We will be taking a look at two of the biggest fights that are coming up this weekend. It'll be on the Bellator side, Bellator 216. It will be Paul Semtex Daley against Michael Venom Page. And then on Sunday, the first UFC on ESPN card, it will be Francis Ngannou against Cain Velazquez. So we'll be focusing on those two fights today, right here on Angel's Combat World. Angel's Combat World. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the podcast. Thank you for downloading, sharing, liking it, telling your friends and family, etc., etc. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. First of all, let's touch on the subject of Bellator 216, specifically Bellator 216's main event, which will be Paul Semtex Daley against Michael Venom Page. This has been one of the matchups that should have been made maybe 1 or 2 years ago, or maybe more. But given that how young MVP's MMA career relatively is, I can see where it makes sense. He's only 13-0, but since his victories have been so spectacular, you can definitely make the case that this fight should have been made earlier. I think it was maybe it's not too late. I think it's the perfect time. Maybe because Paul Daley's window is closing, but come on, it's not. Paul Daley's not an old man. He's 35. But anyways, so let's see how they match up. Paul Semtex Daley, he's 35. He's 5'9". He's been fighting for a long time. 40 wins, 16 losses. We've seen him everywhere. We saw him in the UFC. We saw him in Strikeforce. He's been at Bama, Dubai FC, CC's, BFC, Ringside MMA. You name it. He's been everywhere. His first fight, his first professional fight, was June 29th, 2003. And he won. From then on, he just went on to have a heck of a career, like a real beefy resume for sure. Some key matchups that he had in his career, key people that he faced when he was in the UFC for sure. He faced Martin Kampmann and beat him. He faced Josh Koscheck and lost. He faced in the UFC Tyron Woodley. He faced Tyron Woodley when they were in Strikeforce, really, and he lost by decision. He had that epic fight that was one of the most memorable one-round fights, I think, in the world of MMA, against Nick Diaz, which he had Nick Diaz rocked. And somehow Nick Diaz, when he was on the floor, he was looking at him, he was dodging punches while he was on the ground. It was a crazy fight. And then Nick Diaz just kept that pressure on him. It eventually rocked him, and Daley fell backwards in such a weird way. So a lot of people claimed early stoppage. I don't think so. No one falls like that unless there's something terribly wrong going on in their head right at that moment. So I think it was a perfect stoppage. It was a great fight. I remember it vividly, and it's for sure one of the most memorable fights of MMA as we know it. Then when he moved to Bellator, he had a bunch of good fights. He fought Douglas Lima. They went to a decision. He lost. He lost to Rory McDonald not that long ago by submission, almost 2 years ago, May 2017. And his last fight was against John Fitch, and he lost by decision too. His last victory was against Lawrence Larkin, second round knockout in September 2017. So when we look at Paul Semtex Daley, we see a guy that has fought 58 times, 40 wins, 16 losses, 2 draws. This is a man that the first thing, if you didn't know anything about MMA, if you didn't know anything about fighting, but you just look at his name and you look at his record, you see, this man, number one, he has a lot of experience, and number two, he is resilient. That man has fought almost 60 times. There's not a lot left, because these two gentlemen, Paul Semtex Daley and Michael Venom Page, they're in the top 10 all-time greatest British fighters of all time, without a doubt. If we look at the history of the whole thing, we know that Michael Bisping, Brad Pickett, Ross Pearson maybe also, they're up there. And Paul Daley for sure, he has the track record to be up there. But we have to look at Michael Page as one of the greatest British fighters of all time. And some people hate this, that we have to immediately in a 13 fight career think of somebody like Michael Page as he's one of the greatest of a certain region. But hey, he has a record. If he beats Paul Daley, even though Paul Daley is not he's not a top 10 pound for pound fighter, he's still a great fighter. He's still a respectable opponent, above average opponent for sure. So let's just discard any other kind of thing and just focus on that. This is a very important fight for both of them for sure. Let's move on to Michael Venom Page. So Michael Venom Page, I'm sure most of the younger audience knows who he is, because if he's flashy, he's a guy that, you know, he gets his name out there, and people either like him or hate him because of it. But hey, if you're a true MMA fan, you really appreciate this man. So his attributes, if you will, real quick. He's 31 years old. He's 6'3". He fights at 170 welterweight. Yeah, he's a big guy for sure. 13 wins, 8 knockouts, 3 submissions, 2 decisions, and a bunch of highlights. He's left a bunch of highlights in his wake. Last fight, it was against David Rickles, and David Rickles' face exploded. He began bleeding the second he got touched, and for some reason, psychologically, that counter, right, or the uncomfortable movement of MVP, or the fact that Rickles just couldn't do anything with MVP. He just got. I don't want to say he quit, but hey, he didn't want to fight anymore, even though he could. Mentally, he wasn't there anymore. Something snapped, something broke. It's unfortunate to see these warriors just retire like that in the cage. But hey, it happens. Same way that in boxing, Vasily Lomachenko has made people say no mas a couple of times. MVP is a very uncomfortable fighter that he's undefeated still. So there's something about his style that people just can't understand. It is that karate-based style, you know, Raymond Daniels, Wonderboy Thompson, MVP, and then for sure one of the first ones to do it at least successfully and become a champion, Lyoto the Dragon Machida. It's just that uncomfortable, completely sideways, blitzing style, always moving, always jumping back and forth, always aware, always feinting, always giving you different looks, always making you react to the smallest movements they make, and then that's just so uncomfortable. How I see this fight going, I think Michael Page is just too overwhelming. I don't know if Paul Semtex Daley can do anything with him. It's not a knock on Semtex. It's just a reality. MVP is a phenomenon. But man, when that left hand of Paul Daley touches people crumble. Still, at his age, and I say his age. He's not old. What I mean is that at this point of his career, he's had a long career. He's fought 58 times, but he's only 35, and he's a above average fighter still. When he touches people with that left hand, people crumble. People's legs stop working. I don't know the specific medical name for what happens when Paul Daley touches people with their left hand but what I do know is people automatically shut down, and that could happen. We haven't really seen MVP get touched by such a powerful puncher like Paul Daley. Paul Daley has stopped people like young up and coming fighters before. It wouldn't be the first time. He definitely he beat Jorge Masvidal at SF13 in 2010. So he always has a chance, you know what I mean? And he can pull it off as a decision too. But thinking of who it is he's facing, such an uncomfortable fighter that everybody seems to have a problem with his style. I don't know how this is going to go, but what I do know is it's going to be a great fight for however long it lasts. It would be awesome to see if it lasts the whole 5 rounds, because it is a main event. I'm almost certain it is 5 rounds. It is a fight that I'm definitely looking forward to. Paul Semtex Daley can definitely end it with one big shot, and it could happen. I really want to see what happens if it goes to the ground. I want to see how Paul Daley can react to MVP's ground game. I want to see how Paul Daley adapts to the weird style that MVP brings. I would really like to know who he's working with and who he's bringing in to be prepared to prepare himself for this fight. For sure, I would bring Raymond Daniels. That's a name that comes to mind immediately. Exciting fight for sure. A fight that I think a casual fan would enjoy. I think this is something that you might want to watch with your girlfriend or boyfriend if they're not huge fans. For sure, is a fight that can bring. I think they can bring casual fans to Bellator even more. And as a MMA fan, a hardcore MMA fan, breaking this down and trying to find out who has an edge over who, what could happen, the different scenarios. I think this is a treat for sure. I'll be glad if it's a first round knockout, if it's a first round submission, if it's a 5-rounder, if a decision, if it's any result, I'll be happy, because I know these guys are going to bring it. I don't really want to predict anything, but everything points to an MVP stoppage. Paul Daley has been knocked out before by people less uncomfortable than MVP, so everything points to that. That is what I am going with. Do whatever you want with that, but it is definitely the most likely scenario. With that being said, let us move on to the other subject of this podcast, which is Cain Velazquez against Francis Ngannou. Cain Velazquez 14-2-0. He hasn't fought since UFC 200 against Travis Brown, where he won by TKO first round. The fight before that was a whole year before that against Fabricio Verdum, where he lost his championship. unfortunately, before that, so the Travis Brown fight was UFC 200, which was July 2016. The fight before that was against Fabricio Verdum, June 2015. The fight before that was against Junior Dos Santos in October 2013. So because of injuries he's had, man, unfortunately, this is one of the things that disappoints me more about combat sports in general, but more MMA. This seems to happen a lot. Some guys just can't stay healthy. We saw that with Tony Ferguson, Khabib. We've seen that a lot, and I don't know if there's a more relevant case to this subject than Cain Velazquez. Cain Velazquez is, man, he's 36 years old now, and it's a shame because a lot of people agree, a lot of MMA experts agree that this man, at one point, and arguably all time, could have been the greatest heavyweight of all time. And we keep throwing around the all-time, greatest of all time name out there, but whoever witnessed the reign of Cain Velazquez from the moment that he beat Brock Lesnar to then he lost against Junior Dos Santos, that first UFC on Fox card with that crazy overhand right, then his comeback against Antonio Bigfoot Silva with that bloody TKO that they were just covered in blood. Then that rematch against Junior Dos Santos that went 5 rounds that he won. Then he faced Antonio Bigfoot Silva again, and this time he made a little bit quicker work of him. He just rocked him with the hands, and then eventually took his back and kept grounding and pounding until Mario Yamasaki pulled him off of him. Then the rubber match against Junior Dos Santos, he finished Junior Dos Santos in the 5th round with 1 minute and 51 seconds remaining. That was the reign of Cain Velazquez. Look how short this was. He won it against Brock Lesnar, couldn't defend it, then won it again against Junior Dos Santos and only defended it twice. But just imagine if Cain Velazquez could have stayed healthy. Because between the time that he won his championship against Brock Lesnar and the moment he defended it for the first time against Junior Dos Santos, it was more than a year. He won it in October 2010 and he defended it for the first time November 2011 and lost. Just imagine if Cain Velasquez could have stayed healthier and he could have been a little bit more active. Just imagine. For sure, I think his skills make him the greatest heavyweight we've seen in the modern era. I think he beats Fedor Emelianenko, both at their prime, and I think he beats all the great heavyweights in their prime for sure. He beat Junior when Junior was in his prime anyways, and he was a big puncher that actually had legit boxing background, legit boxing abilities. He knew how to slip, he knew how to counter, he knew how to set traps for his opponents. He is a bad man. Junior Dos Santos is a bad man, and he in his prime 5-6 years ago, Junior Dos Santos without a doubt was one of the greatest heavyweights in that era. But then Cain beat him twice and stopped him in their last fight, because Cain Velasquez was that talented, and then he kept learning, he kept making himself better and grinding every day, and he got to that level and he got to that moment. Maybe we've seen the best of Cain. He's 36 now, but you never know with Cain. A healthy Cain is the scariest heavyweight we've ever seen. Now let's move on to Francis Ngannou, who, believe it or not, only has one less fight than Cain Velazquez. Cain Velasquez has 16 fights, and Francis Ngannou has 15. Francis Ngannou is 13-2-0. He has 8 knockouts, 4 submissions. his last fight, let's go with the stats. He's 32 years old and he's 6'4". Usually comes around 258 to 59 fight night or weigh-in day. And his last fight was against Curtis Blades, which he won by TKO, first round, 45 seconds. Before that, he experienced his only 2 losses. His first loss was against Stipe Miocic for the heavyweight championship. He got taken the distance. He got dragged into deep waters and drowned. He was drowning from the second round on. And then he fought Derek Lewis in what was one of the biggest disappointments in Dana White's words, because they matched 2 of the heaviest punchers in the division, and it became not such an entertaining fight, and everybody was disappointed. It is what it is. Every time you step into a cage or octagon or a ring, any type of fighting platform, you risk your life. I don't really care if people call it not entertaining or not. You walk in healthy, you can walk out on a stretcher and never be able to walk again or talk again. So let's respect these people. It doesn't matter the outcome. Francis Ngannou is something that we've only seen in comic books. This man touches people and people crumble and they're not the same anymore. From the time we saw him against Curtis Blades well, actually, when we saw him against Luis Barboza and that Dos Anjos versus Roni card UFC on Fox 17, we saw him, and then we saw him against Miljajovic. We knocked him on the first round, and then we saw him against the moment that I really said whoa was when he fought Andrei Arlovski. Even though Andrei Arlovski is not the Andrei Arlovski that won the championship more than 10 years ago, he's still a tough fighter that it takes a lot. But then the way that he punched him, he connected, and Andre lifted off the ground. That was a scary thing. And obviously the thing that cemented him as the number 1 contender in the heavyweight division was his disgusting knockout of Alistair Overeem. The uppercut that sent Alistair to oblivion, pretty much. He got knocked senseless. And if somebody asked me what the nastiest knockout you've seen, I think that's it. I think the Ngannou knockout over Alistair Overeem, I think that's it. I'm not sure there's another knockout that comes that close or was that memorable and disgusting. That's the word that I want to use, and I don't use it in a negative connotation. It was nasty. It was disgusting. The way his head snapped back and the way his head bounced off the mat was disgusting, and then concerning right after that, because you wanted to know if he was okay. It was a dangerous moment for sure. But Alistair is a tough dude. He's done that to people, so that's the circle of combat sports. You do that to people, people do that to you eventually when you become a gatekeeper sort of guy. This fight is very entertaining. It's going to be very entertaining if you ask me, which no one is, but I'm going to tell you anyways. The way I see it, hopefully for Cain's sake, this becomes a duplicate of the Stipe Miocic game plan. Hopefully that's what happens. Francis Ngannou because both things have happened to Cain Velazquez. He has found a way to grind people from the opening bell to the last bell, or while he's grinding on people and just sucking the life out of people, then he finds a way, and then he grounds and pounds. He can do both of those. But then also we've seen him get knocked out. He got knocked out by Junior Dos Santos in a way that Ngannou can do it too. Because the way, remember, Junior Dos Santos connected with that overhand right, based off of a lot of hand movement and a lot of feints too, which is what Junior does. But Francis has that kind of power that is just obscene, that I'm not sure if Cain can take it. I don't know if Cain gets touched I don't know if he can come back from that. So hopefully he stays smart, because the thing that Stipe Miocic had for him is that chin. He got touched, he got rocked a couple of times in that Ngannou fight, but then Stipe kept the pressure, kept his weight on Francis. Cain's wrestling ability is off the charts. He has to be one of the most talented wrestlers to ever come out of wrestling and then into MMA. His wrestling is better than Stipe's for sure, at an amateur collegiate level. But the way that Stipe mixed that in with leg kicks and feints, and then he actually took a couple of shots, which is undesirable. But then he got rocked, he got touched, and then he found a way to shorten the distance and then just grind and keep the pressure on him. Hopefully Cain does this. I really don't know if Cain Velazquez gets touched by Francis Ngannou. I don't know if he can come back. Hopefully he doesn't get touched, and then maybe, because I really want to see Cain win. But both scenarios are very, 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 very likely. I don't know which one is more likely than the other, but for the casual fan, they definitely want to see a knockout by Francis Ngannou. I think Cain Velazquez has what it takes to just shorten distance, stay smart, slip, counter, and then just grind the whole fight. Just grind the 5 rounds and stay smart for the 5 rounds. I think that's the only way that Cain can win. Or we can all be surprised and then Cain just shortens the distance, gets Ngannou's back, and just starts grounding and pounding him, and then finishes him in like 2 minutes. That could happen too. His wrestling ability is so high that we can see that happening for sure. But the way I look at it is only 2 scenarios are the most likely, which is an Ngannou knockout very early, or a 5-round decision victory, unanimous decision victory by Cain Velazquez. And I think that's it. We're gonna leave this here. I only wanted to preview these 2 fights because they're the biggest fights we're gonna see this weekend. Hopefully you liked it. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Please subscribe on YouTube, retweet on Twitter. And on Twitter, I am at Angels Combat. Facebook is at Angels Combat 21. Angels Combat and the number 21. And then YouTube at Angels Combat. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, family members, with the people you kind of like but don't really. Doesn't matter, with your acquaintances, with your co-workers, with that cousin you only see 2 times a year. Just share, retweet, like, and subscribe, and please download all that. I'm pretty much on all the platforms right now. I'm definitely on Apple Podcasts. I will be on Spotify and Google Podcasts very soon. I'm just waiting for their confirmation, but I'm on most podcast platforms like Audio Republic and all those. So I'm definitely on TuneIn and the most famous podcast apps. So if you try to look for me, if you try to look for the podcast on one of the podcast platforms and you can't find me, let me know through social media, and we'll get this right. So thank you so much for sharing this space with me. Thank you for downloading and for liking and sharing and subscribing and all that good stuff. Thank you so much. This was Angel, and this was Angel's Combat World.